Every day, 1.9 billion times a year, a New Yorker steps onto a metal tube and performs what sociologist Erving Goffman called civil inattention, standing chest to chest with a complete stranger, no words, no acknowledgement, no eye contact. Nothing happens on that train, and that is not normal human behavior. That is a trained psychological discipline so deeply embedded in your body you perform it without knowing you're performing it. You have been doing it your entire adult life. There is a specific thing you do the moment you board a crowded car. You scan, one quick sweep across the faces, then down to the phone, the floor, the scuffed left toe of your shoe. Anywhere but the eyes of the person standing 4 inches from you. Nobody taught you that. No one sat you down and explained the protocol. You do it automatically, every time on every train. Goffman named this behavior in his 1963 work behavior in public places the act of registering a stranger just enough to confirm they are a human being, then immediately withdrawing, granting them privacy in a space that has no walls. Sounds passive, but it is the opposite of passive. It is constant, exhausting, active psychological labor on every single ride, and every second you spend staring at a dermatology ad you have memorized is a second your brain burns managing the anxiety of a stranger's shoulder locked against yours. A stranger whose name you will never know, whose interior life is as dense and private as your own. You are not zoning out on that train, you are working. Here is why that labor is necessary every single morning. Picture a server engineered to handle 100 tasks a minute, then flooded with 10,000 complex requests a second. Without a firewall, the processor overheats and the system crashes hard. The human brain on a rush hour platform at Grand Central is that server. The saxophone screaming from the far end of the platform, a man arguing loudly into a cracked phone screen beside you, the smell of something wet and unidentifiable near the third door, the physical weight of 6.5 bodies compressed into 1 square meter. That last number is real 6.5 persons per square meter during peak rush hours in 2025. Georg Simmel identified this defense mechanism all the way back in 1903 in The Metropolis and Mental Life. He called it the blasé attitude, the outward indifference city dwellers carry not from cruelty or coldness, but because the alternative is a complete neurological collapse inside a steel tube going 60 miles an hour under Lexington Avenue. The blank face on the morning commute is not rudeness, it is survival. The firewall is running and the unnecessary data is getting dropped. The man across from you is not ignoring you, he is barely keeping the system online. What is even more striking is the way the bodies actually move. 50 people in a car. The doors close, the train lurches forward. Nobody announces a direction, nobody negotiates a single inch of floor space. And yet, with extraordinary precision, bodies slide past each other without collision, without conversation, without a single word of coordination exchanged across the MTA's 472 stations. Imagine a handful of identical magnets thrown onto a smooth table, all turned so their positive poles face outward toward each other. They never touch. An invisible field redirects each magnet around the others in a continuous, frictionless dance across the surface. That invisible field is civil inattention operating between every stranger on that train. A fraction of a second glance establishes the field. I see you. Immediately dropping the eyes activates the repulsion. I grant you distance. Bodies slide and nobody connects. Hold the gaze 1 second too long and you flip the magnet and invite a collision on that platform. This is a choreography performed by millions of strangers simultaneously, with zero rehearsal, zero conductor, and zero written score anywhere. The phone is the other piece of machinery running this entire system. You pull it out within seconds of boarding the car. And you probably tell yourself you are checking messages or watching something. Sociologists studying transit behavior describe the smartphone not as entertainment but as an infrastructural tool, a portable sensory deprivation tank. Noise-canceling headphones seated in both ears, screen inches from the face. The physical body is pressed hip to hip against a stranger in a moving tube, while the mind has left the train entirely and gone somewhere else. Researchers call this intimate alienation, the condition of existing in extreme physical proximity with dozens of people while remaining psychologically thousands of miles from all of them. The phone is not a distraction from the subway, the phone is how you survive the subway. It is the brass diver's helmet you pull over your head before descending into 40 feet of human density below the street. Not entertainment, insulation. The system is not invincible, and late 2025 proved it at one station. A video surfaced from the 96th Street station showing a passenger holding the train doors open while the packed car stood completely still. 5 minutes the car was packed. Nobody could move. Nobody could exit. A woman snapped and physically pushed the person blocking the doors open. The incident fractured into a public debate that ran for days online. 5 minutes, that is the entire margin between order and explosion. The unwritten code of the subway, the civility, the restraint, the carefully maintained performance of mutual invisibility between strangers runs inside an incredibly narrow window of tolerance at all times. Time on that train is not abstract. It has been commodified so completely that 5 minutes of delay strips a commuter down to something rawer and far less considered than they were at street level above. Sociologists use the term diffuse incivility for disruptions that punish every single passenger in a car simultaneously. Not aggression toward one person, not a loud phone call near your ear. When the whole car gets held hostage by a blocked door, the firewall drops. Every time. 1.65. That is the number of major crimes recorded per million riders across the New York City subway system during 2025. A year when riders took 1.9 billion trips through those underground stations. The safest the system had been in an entire generation of commuters. That number should not exist in a system under this much pressure. A system that daily forces millions of strangers into intimate physical contact in underground tunnels with no natural light and no exits within reach. Recording 1.65 major crimes per million trips defies the biology of the situation. That safety did not come primarily from surveillance cameras mounted on walls, not from NYPD officers stationed on platforms in high visibility gear. It came from millions of ordinary people choosing every single day to hold the line, performing the exhausting discipline of civil inattention instead of surrendering to the proximity and the heat and the 5-minute delay. The subway works because you make it work. You and 1.9 billion other strangers, none of whom you will ever meet on those trains. And now, something is changing inside that arrangement above the turnstiles. In 2026, the MTA retired the MetroCard entirely at every station. The last anonymous way to move through the city untracked, gone. Omni E, the tap-and-ride replacement, tethers every journey to a credit card, a phone, an account with a name attached to every single trip. The anonymous stranger now has a file inside an MTA database. That same year, the MTA launched pilot programs for AI-driven cameras, computer vision systems designed to track passenger movement through the stations, flag unusual behavior and record physical descriptions of anyone suspected of fare evasion. Civil rights groups named it the end of the right to be unobserved in public space. What nobody has fully reckoned with is what that does to the psychology of the unwritten code running between passengers. For over a century, civil inattention was policed by passengers themselves, the disapproving side-eye, the pointed sigh, the deliberate shift of a shoulder away. Human enforcement of a human contract built over generations underground. Now there is an algorithm watching from a camera bolted above the turnstile, an algorithm that cannot read a side-eye or interpret a pointed sigh, an algorithm that cannot distinguish between a man frozen at a turnstile because he is a fare evader, and a man frozen at a turnstile because the Omni system malfunctioned, which according to MTA customer feedback happens regularly during peak hours. The unwritten code is being digitized by a system that has never ridden the train. In late 2025, an artist named Khloe Bass walked into 14 subway stations and took over the public address system in each one. Not to announce delays, not to issue commands over the speakers. Bass played 24 multilingual poetic announcements through those PA speakers, designed specifically to slow the nervous system down inside the station, to briefly crack the armor of intimate alienation between strangers and remind passengers they shared a physical space with other human beings. The same PA system that for decades had broadcast, "If you see something, say something," a command born from post-9/11 fear that trained riders to read the stranger pressed next to them on the platform as a potential threat, was now saying something closer to, "You are not alone down here in this tunnel." A direct assault on the blasé attitude through the station's own speakers. And it worked, because the armor on a crowded train is not as permanent as it feels. Below the surface, the craving for connection sits fully intact and waiting. The MTA's own Valentine's Day campaign in 2026 celebrated couples who met on the A train, people who broke the rule of civil inattention at exactly the right moment and found something real on the other side. The familiar stranger you see every single morning on that same platform, same spot, same paper coffee cup with the torn cardboard sleeve, whose name you have never asked and probably never will ask, exists in a parasocial bond with you that neither of you has named out loud. You notice when that person does not show up at the platform. You will not admit that, but you do notice the empty spot. So here is what you actually do every single morning at that station. You step onto the train and scan the car in one quick sweep. You drop your eyes in a fraction of a second, registering 14 strangers and granting each one privacy inside a metal space that has no walls between any of you. You pull out the phone and seal yourself inside it completely. You stand in someone's intimate zone for 38 minutes without acknowledging their physical existence 3 inches from your body. You exit through the doors and walk up the stairs into the daylight. And you call it a commute like it was nothing at all. 1.65 major crimes per million trips, 1.9 billion riders a year, 6.5 bodies per square meter, no written rules, no contract, no conductor anywhere. And yet every single day, millions of strangers choose order over chaos in a pressurized metal tube running 60 feet below the street. Not because they are told to by a sign on the wall, because the alternative is unthinkable, and somewhere below the firewall, below the armor, below the brass diver's helmet and the noise-canceling headphones, every single one of them knows it while standing on that platform. You know it too, you always have.